On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
I can explain to customers why they should use us. I'm good at the sales part of it. And to some degree, I'm good at understanding our team and what they're good at. But it was taking that step back to say, no one's happy killing ourselves to make no more in profit, just to say that we're a bigger company.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in. What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast. I'm your host. I've got Jordan Simon here on the King stage. My brother, Jordan, how are you?
Good, Chaz. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. We had our own little mini podcast without recording it. You and I just now chatting about podcasts, and you've started one since like us inviting you, which is kind of cool. And so I want to learn about all the things that you're doing. You got a couple of different businesses. I'm really excited for this opportunity to chat with you. So tell us what kind of business that you got, brother.
Yeah, man. Appreciate the invite. Happy to be here. But it kind of goes way back. Growing up, my family, my dad worked in a plumbing company that was owned by my uncle at the time.
Okay.
And my dad was like a serial entrepreneur, right? So growing up, I would work with him doing plumbing calls. I remember doing calls when I was like 8 years old.
Yep.
But then he had a car lot. He had a sawmill business. So I spent summers growing up playing in the sawmill, like sawdust piles while he was cutting wood.
Oh, yeah.
So the story starts, kind of from being a kid, growing up with him, seeing he was always running businesses. So, and when I was like in high school, he ended up buying the plumbing business from my uncle. So he ran it for like 12 years. So I did it for the summers in high school through college, worked there. And I knew for a fact that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I knew I did not want to be, a plumber. So went to grad school, got a master's degree in accounting, worked in corporate finance for a few years. And then it kind of got to a point where my parents wanted to retire, wanted to take a step back. And the business, the plumbing business that we had, has such a good name. It's been in that community for so long that, he was kind of looking to sell it, and there was, great value there. And we talked about it because I stayed involved even as I was in corporate finance, because we would talk about things, especially on the technology side, whether it be the website or, integrations with accounting and things like that. But I knew all these people that worked there. They'd been there for some 40 years, some 20 years. So like I grew up with these people, and the idea of a venture capital firm or even just another person coming and buying that business, and you don't then know what's going to happen to those people that you grew up with. It just didn't sit well with me. And so we just got to talking over the course of a few months, where it was like, he kind of asked if I'd be interested in buying in with them and kind of running it so that they could retire. And
transition.
Talked to my wife about it, and we did that. So in 2020, we bought in, and I'm partnered with my parents now, which we kind of talked through different scenarios, but it's worked out really well, I think, in my mind. And we talk almost every day now, my dad and I, just about business or whatever he's doing in Florida. But so we have the plumbing business. Whenever I bought it, we expanded into multiple locations and also into multiple trades. So now we do plumbing, heating and air, and electrical.
Wow.
And then in 2021, the main supplier we used got bought out. The two guys that we used the most, like the actual sales reps that we had the biggest relationship with, kind of went off on their own and started a business. A few months in, I think they kind of hit some struggles, and they approached us and asked if we'd want to buy it. So I saw it as an opportunity to A, get some inventory management, but then B, have the expertise of these guys that knew so much. So now we have the plumbing business, and we also have this supply business that kind of does our inventory and things like that. So I know that was a long story about what the businesses are, but under the Simon Home Services umbrella, we have the home services, and then we also have the supply business as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that there's a natural integration there, just, going forward in the process, or going,
after in the process. And you've done both. After in the process is, okay, well, once we service their plumbing needs, what else can we help them with? Let's add on these other services. And then going backwards in the process, well, where do we get our stuff from? What happens before even us? Well, we got to get the product. So I think that that's really cool that you've expanded in both ways for your business. It's a conglomerate at this point. You got a family, you got a decade, multiple decade scenario in families. And now you've expanded in a couple of different ways. I want to get into more of the story and kind of how you've done that. But for you particularly, before we jump into that, I want to know your why. I mean, you're second generation. It's kind of like the third iteration in your family of business, but second generation. And there's a reason why you're pushing, because even when we were not recording, you were talking about, some other cool things that you're doing. You're starting a podcast and some consulting stuff as well. And it's like, some of this stuff that keeps you pushing. But even though you had all this success already, you just told me how you expanded into other verticals, into other trades, and you bought another company and all this stuff. Why are you still pushing so hard? What gives you the juice?
Well, in the podcast, I talked to somebody one time and they use the analogy of like, we go to the gym and we work out. And then once we get to a certain weight, we don't just say, well, I beat the gym and I stopped, right? Like there's this pursuit of always kind of getting to the best version of yourself. Right. And for me, I wanted to create not necessarily the biggest business or make the most money, but I wanted to create a framework where people want to come work for us, where we're known as, just an expert in our field, but then also like we take care of our people, we take care of our community, kind of like that beacon in our area. For me, that ended up expanding into other things, whether it be helping other small businesses, because when I worked in corporate finance, you kind of get to see some processes, procedures that these huge corporations use. And it's like, well, why can't the small mom and pop business use that as well? So how can I help you use strategic planning and different accounting operations to help, streamline your business? So then it just became we built this framework, but that's now allowed us to spread that to other people. So that, from the podcast where we get to tell stories or hear stories from other people to share with others, to actually going to start, I didn't mention this earlier, but a training program as well. So there in West Virginia, there wasn't an accredited plumbing apprenticeship program in any of the trade schools. So I reached out to trade schools to talk about it. And it's like, I don't know, you can hit all this red tape. I'm like, well, I'll just do it myself. So we actually I started the Mountain State Trade Academy that's going to allow for people to go through an apprenticeship program, whether that's our people or just anybody that wants to learn the trade. So it's at this point, it's more about like, what can we do to keep kind of growing and helping more people?
Yeah, I love the perspective there of not only does it solve your problem, right? Because if you can help more people get certified, then it helps you grow, right? But inevitably you're helping more people, and that's the focus. And I think even bigger than that, it's a problem. Like it's just a problem that exists. And you said, hey, if y'all can't do it, let me take care of it.
All right.
Put it right here. I got big shoulders. I can take care of it. Right?
I know. I mean, Trey, and even from I hope to expand it beyond that, because I was talking to other trade schools that did the same thing in different states. I talked to one in New Hampshire, the Granite State Trade Academy, and they were talking about like these YouTube videos or channels that they use to help train people. And one was called like the HVAC school. So then I started doing some research. The plumbing school didn't exist. So it's like, well, then I'll start the plumbingschool.com too. So then we can hopefully take it beyond just, a true accredited apprenticeship to help anybody that's, let me learn something more about what's going on in my home or in my business or, anything with the plumbing and in the building.
I love it. Yeah. You're hitting on all the right things, man, because, eventually what seems to help a certain group of people can now also affect so many others. And just to bring it always back to, this king mindset, this is what a king does. It's not just this one individual pursuit, this one business or my family or it's not about myself. It's about, okay, so here's my talents, here's my influence and my impact. And I want it to be as big as possible, which then all ties back to what you're saying, which is you becoming the best version of yourself. Even though you may have hit already a pinnacle, it seems like maybe the most, there's still so much room when you have this awareness of like, man, there's just so much more we can get done. There's so much more influence or impact that you can have. It almost feels like what you've done isn't even anything, right? Do you feel that way too?
Oh yeah, for sure. But then as I've gotten older and I've had kids myself, I go back to these lessons that my dad would teach me growing up. And one thing he always talked about was stewardship. So, even biblically speaking, like the money, the things that we have, we are just stewards of. And I've really taken that to heart with the business. Like, it's not mine. It's just what we have to be able to provide for, all these employees and their families. So
Yeah.
I take it as my responsibility to make it the best that it can be, as big as it can be, so that we can help those people, because I'm a steward for that.
I love that, man. I haven't made our core values for Gathering the Kings public necessarily, but one of them is that we're royal stewards. And this mindset right here, this word steward, is very unique to me, and oftentimes used in maybe more of a faith-based scenario. But the principle of it is kingly. The principle of it is it's lack of self. You have to think of others, which is the very heart of, a father or a king, a servant, right? Like, yes, I have this power and this authority, but I'm using it in the way to be able to help others. And that's what stewardship is. It's like, man, I've been given all of this, in this case, a business or influence or my son or a marriage or whatever, all these things that are connected to me, man, how can I then turn and do it well, take care of them well, push into them well, build them well, all of those things, right?
Yeah. And what I tell the team is, like, I've never really been about like hierarchy. So instead of a pyramid, it's kind of like an inverse, where the point, myself being is the support system. I'm here to support you, to help you do your job as best as possible. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job. So to me, it's upside down in the sense of, if you're at the top, you're there to help support your team or whoever it is that's working with you.
Exactly. Yeah. I've heard it also said, like, it's my job to make your job better, easier, more fulfilling, all of that. I think that all those kind of play into that same mindset of taking what we have and then being able to serve others through it. I think once your team, tell me what you think about this. Once your team gets a hold of that also, and it's not just them being served or supported, right? But them taking that same stewardship mentality, or even just a servant heart, and being able to press into their fellow coworkers, the clients, of course, their families, their communities, their church, like that same king mindset. When you can kind of trickle that down, even now you have like this multiplier of like, whoa, when we walk by this business, or when we walk by this person's house, or when we interact with this individual, whoa, it's different,
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that maybe I've struggled with is getting that same passion for that mission to every individual.
Sure.
And I think everybody to some degree struggles with that, right? I mean, because they don't own the business. They're not going to, and they shouldn't work as hard as you do, but getting them to understand what we do. Like, people can, when you're a plumber, it's not always an easy day on the job, right? I mean, you may be doing something that smells bad, or it's cold outside, or it's hard work. So I always thought about it when I was in the field of like, I'm helping someone with their most valuable asset, and it's their home. So I get a chance to come into their home and be someone that does something for somebody, rather than just thinking about it like, well, I got to go do this crappy thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. When you change your perspective, really in life, like when you can make that shift to value, that's when you become more valuable. Usually that's when you make more money. It's usually when you grow a business, like all those mindset shifts that we go through over the course of time, whether it be an employee. I can think of when I was an employee and I made that shift to how can I become more valuable? Well, I take this task of going and, unclogging this drain seriously, because man, I get to help this family here today. And so that changes my attitude when I walk in the room and I interact with the client. I'm, hey, hello, how are you? And maybe I'm pointing out different things in the home that I think are really cool. And I'm having this experience because I want to be valuable. In return, then obviously I become more valuable to the business even. So I think there's an encouraging there for all of, even team members listening as well. I want to go into your story here a little bit.
Okay.
So you come in, you say, I don't want to be a plumber.
Yeah.
But here you are, you buy a plumbing company. And of course you've made some other purchases since, but give us a little bit of the journey. Like, what was the first couple of years like? You bought it right before COVID. Like, just give us a little bit of that kind of you getting started story.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, there was already a really good base to the business. We had really good market penetration.
Yeah.
It's a relatively smaller community, and we'd been around for 40 years. So in my mind, there was only two ways to grow. We could spread and cover more area, or we could go into different trades. So I'm like, well, we'll just try a little bit of both. And that's kind of what I explained to the team the first time we had like a meeting after the transition. It's like, here's, you guys have built this great business. Here's my plan for the future. We're going to do those two things. So we kind of started with just one location that's about an hour from our main, and it grew relatively rapidly. And I think that I underestimated how easy the growth would be, especially in that industry where it's everybody has these problems, and a lot of times the issue is finding people to do it.
Yeah.
So even made the mistakes of growing too quickly, and then we kind of put a pause on it. So yeah, but then you have to have the framework too to manage different locations. That changes your business entirely.
Oh yeah.
And I've heard other people talk about it, like there's a book, right? What got you here won't get you there.
That's right.
Where it's like, just because you got a business to $1 million, the difference between a $1 million and a $10 million business is a lot of different things. It's not just doing more of the same stuff.
Right.
So
exactly.
trying to figure out what those things are and how to grow profitably and in a manageable way has been the struggle.
Yeah, especially if you're adding in the dynamic of a whole nother location that's separate from your current business. It's different from taking one physical location and going, to 5 or 10 million, as opposed to now we're going to create separate locations. That's a whole nother thing. I didn't know this myself. I did the same exact thing with franchising. I skipped over from, I had some locations in Kansas and Missouri, and then I skipped way over to Florida. And at the time, people, even in the franchise system, were like, why are you doing this? Are you nuts? I was just thinking, why would I not? It's Florida. Like now I get to go to the beach, which, I think I've been to that beach 2 times, But the reality is that like, there's a whole nother dynamic. Now I appreciate that business. It is one of the best business decisions I've ever made. However, that dynamic of another location that I can't get to within an hour, even.
Yeah. No. So how
changes the management style,
Yeah. How did you transition to doing a remote management? Because I think that's
all kinds of fun stuff there. And I have to give you 240 episodes in now, and you're the first guest that has turned this back on me. So I'm going to answer the question, but we're going to get right back to you. Don't worry. Yeah. So in that there is a whole nother level of management, obviously. Right. So for me, it's a store level. Same thing probably with a service company. You have to have some sort of an office manager or a GM, depending upon the structure of the business, of the physical location. And then I had a whole nother level of someone managing the individual managers. And so it's all it really is. We know this from corporate America, because you and I both know this. You just keep going up, and you have a regional person, and then a director, and then the director of the directors, and then the VP, and it just keeps going. So that's probably the biggest difference. And then having systems, obviously, those things just become so much more important. Ways to track production, making sure that people have what they need to feel supported, all those things. But it just gets heightened because it's like, man, we're separated at a big level here. I can't just get you to you today, which is probably the biggest blessing at the same time. So I'll give this to you as well as all the other listeners. The two franchises that always did better from a management perspective were the ones that weren't in the city that I lived. And it's because I was forced to run them in a specific way. They couldn't just call me and me run to save the day. I had to create other solutions so that they still could call somebody if because things go wrong. It's a business. It's not like things go smoothly all the time. So I had to create other solutions, because knowing that most business owners like me are just fix it type people. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. And so if you call me with a problem and I can go fix it, then I'm going to go fix it, which is a problem if you're trying to grow and scale. You can't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, that was our challenge too, because we were so used to everybody's in one building. They're used to going to the owner and saying, "Hey, fix this problem for me." And it's like, well, if we're going to scale, we have to get out of that. And that was certainly the biggest challenge. And what's different, not to mitigate franchising, but there are somewhat a little bit more rigidity around the processes and procedures.
Yep.
So for us, we were just my dad was on the verge of retirement. He didn't care if there was procedures in place. It's like we do it this. They've had success. Why do we need to change what we're doing?
Exactly.
So that's been the thing, and a big focus of 2023 for me is going to be, let's actually put down in writing some of these processes and procedures, because now we're to a point where there's a different structure and a different dynamic. And I was afraid. So like specifically, I said I didn't like hierarchies. So I didn't really want to give people specific titles. Even myself, like I don't have a title with the business, because to me, we're all kind of working together. What that created was a sense of nobody knew who to go to.
Yep. 100%.
I didn't realize this until I'm big on talking to all the employees individually, and they started telling me like, well, I don't really know who's my boss and who do I go to. And I'm like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. I was thinking nobody wanted to be, below or above, but then there was
It's
no
guidance.
solutions. Yeah. I mean, so
Solutions.
I've learned a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think all that's super vulnerable. I hope the listeners paying close attention, because you've got two business owners that have had similar struggles in different industries, but we're talking about really the same thing. And it's people management, it's systems, it's being able to create something repeatable. And so obviously for you didn't have problems getting the jobs, right? You said, like, we got the work and we grew faster than I thought. It's just the implementation. So you've got the client journey that's in there. You've got how how people are experiencing you, which comes down to training, which comes down to SOPs, which comes down to this repeatable process. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done in that, especially if you've got this old business, that everybody's just been kind of doing the same thing for a while. And especially if it's all up here. One quick thing I'll give to you, and I'll give it to the listener as well, because there's new AI out there now. So take a video of you explaining this process, or maybe it's someone on your team, even better, right? Like, this person does this task. Okay, great. Get on Zoom, hit the record button, or use Loom, record it, put it into a editing software. You've got a podcast. You know what I'm talking about. You could throw it into an editing software. It'll transcribe it for you. Take the transcription, throw that into OpenAI and say, create, the step-by-step process based on this transcript. Boom. Now you have a written format within 30 seconds of what came out of the video. So you put the video and then the written steps in a folder. And then whenever anybody needs to be trained on that deal, you got now a written and a video form of training and an SOP right there. Boom.
I can't believe I never thought of that. That's very, I like that.
Super easy. So, all right, back to you.
Oh, I like the back and forth, because it helps me, and I'm sure it helps the listeners to hear your insights on your business, because obviously you found success as well. So
yeah, it's good stuff, man. I appreciate you being willing to even ask. I want to know of a good decision. So you've been in this role, especially as a second generation. Like, I think there's so many guys like me, first generation, that hope to one day maybe be in business with my kids. I would just love that. What's a good decision that you've made since taking over that you can look back and go, like, ooh, this thing right here, I'd do it over and over again? What is it? What can we learn?
I think there's several in there, but I wouldn't say it's kind of hard to place it on one exact thing, but it's around the idea of like efficiency. So
okay, yeah.
Because I came from the corporate finance, they had structures and processes to identify different, let's call them KPIs, to see what's being successful. We weren't doing that before. And one thing that I'm going to backtrack again here, but when I worked in the business, I always felt like, well, Dad should do things this way. Like, I could do it. It's easy to think that when you're just sitting in a different chair. And then once you own it, you're like, oh crap, I see exactly why.
There's a lot of moving pieces here.
Or it's like, well, and not that one person's way of doing it. Like, if someone bought the business, they may do it completely different. Not that it's wrong, it's just different.
Yeah.
So it was around, let's actually implement some data collection so we can make decisions. And then we started to see what type of work actually made us the most money.
Yeah.
What type of work, was really just keeping guys busy, but wasn't. So the decision around, let's use technology. It was an expense, right?
Yeah.
To do it and to start to track it, but let's actually find out where we need to improve, what we're doing well from a true numbers perspective, not just what feels right or what feels good, but what is actually driving the growth and the revenue and the profit at the end.
To give a follow-up question to that, when you found that, a drain clog versus a new shower install, I don't know. Mm-hmm. When you had this list of like, okay, here's, it's always the 80-20, right? Like 80% of our revenue comes from these tasks here, and, the rest come from over here. Did you press into the things that you weren't doing very well or not very much of because you felt like there was more opportunity there? Or did you press more into like, let's get rid of those and only do these things? What was your take there?
So, well, there's a little bit of a dichotomy here. It was a good decision to track it, but then I realized we're a kind of a response-based business. I can't control the calls that come in.
It's true.
So what then I found was kind of applying the 80-20 rule is that 20% of the crews or the team was actually what was driving it. So yes, there is types of work and pricing structures and things like that can make a difference, but it's okay. Well, these guys, no matter what we put them on, they end up making more money than the other ones. So then it's like, okay, let's talk to them and figure out why that is. Is it
Interesting.
actually expertise? Is it motivation? What is it from these crews that makes them so, I mean, vastly better than others? And not that the other people aren't working hard. It may just be, the mindset around, making sure that everything's billed properly was a big one, or that all their time was captured. So there was several steps in it, but until you actually pull those numbers out, you don't know. Like, you have an idea of who's making you the most money, or who's, who's most knowledgeable just based on conversations, but then sometimes that's not necessarily who's actually.
How does that translate to profitability? Yeah. Super good stuff. I mean, I hope that, again, that the listeners paying attention here, because you're given really, really practical things. And obviously, like you said, these take like an investment, whether it be in a software or even in time, to figure these things out. And then to know what to do with it, I think is, a whole nother thing.
Well, that's where we talked a little bit about, I have these, the home service businesses, but that's why I kind of started that consulting business on the side. It was like, hey, there's all this insight that I got from the corporate world and from small businesses, that it's like someone that's just running, and maybe they're just crossing into that 7 figures, or they're kind of approaching it. You kind of are now going to start to need a team around it. And maybe you can't quite afford, to hire a CFO, but you can use someone, like myself, or there's other people out there, other technologies out there that can say, well, here's how you actually run these numbers. And then here's how you make decisions off of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's two pieces there. You got to know the numbers. And I think that's probably what most business owners know. Not that they know their numbers. They know that they need to know their numbers, even though they still don't. That's step one. But then step two, really the why behind knowing the numbers is so that you can make good decisions, right? Like, you can't, you're just, blind shooting out here if you don't know the detail.
Well, you talk about this a lot in the show and in some of your posts, where it's like, if you're in the business all the time, right? Like, then you can't work on the business and help it grow, because then you just have a stressful job. The only way to kind of, even if you don't necessarily want to sell your business down the road, but if you ever want to be able to step back a little bit, you have to go through those policies and procedures. And I think the only way to actually know what those procedures and things like that could be is to understand from a numbers perspective the function of the business and what's working and what doesn't. So I think that, finding that information is key, but it's hard to do. And I get that it's hard, especially when you're just starting out, or maybe at a level where you don't have office staff to dive into it, because you're just worried about satisfying the customer.
Yeah. And I think that there's even, you made this point a few minutes ago, even the guy who's at the $1 million or $2 million or even $3 million, they've just never really dug into the numbers. They've just been hustling.
Yeah.
They've just been selling, and maybe their charisma and their leadership has just gotten them and their team there, which is fine. It's incredible, actually. Yeah. But now it's time to like make decisions based on data as opposed to the whim, especially if we're talking about building something sustainable, something that's going to be around for the next 50 years, as opposed to, 5 months. And then now we're worried about a recession in 23, we've got to build something bigger than that. I want to know about a bad decision, something in the last couple of years that is just like, ooh, palm on the head. Don't want to do that again. What was it?
I think that it was, and I touched on it a little bit, but around that, growing way too fast. And it was easy to do because we had all these calls coming in. So it was just like, well, let's just find people to fulfill it. So we bought vehicles, we hired people, and then you realize that those particular people, it's if you're just throwing people in and out, you have higher turnover. You have people that aren't bought into the mission, and then they're angering customers, or they're, I don't know, just doing things that aren't really on brand.
It's a trickle.
So, and I'll dive in like a little bit more detail. So, we from 2020 to 2022 doubled in size. So in 2 years, so it's a 40-year-old business, but then we doubled like immediately. Yeah. It was easy. I could double again if we wanted to, but after realizing the hardships of it, I'm like, we're not going to grow until we figure out these procedures and how we actually do this without being super stressed out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what prompted the training program too, is like, I want to be able to, let's hire people that want to get into this business and want to learn it the right way. And we'll have our own training behind that, rather than just grabbing people that, are just job hopping, and then we're putting them on a van, sending them to someone's house to do work that doesn't represent us in the way that we want. Yeah. So we ran across people that, ended up then leaving or starting their own, and then bad mouthing us, calling our customers. Like you just get involved with a bunch of people that aren't really what we wanted. So Just that push to grow, to have more employees, more revenue, clearly was not the way to go about building something.
Yeah. Yeah. There's to use some king language for the listener. Again, I love kind of, going back and forth between reality and then maybe some fictitious story here, but it, when a king takes ground, right? Like literally think of a kingdom, and we send the army out and we're fighting against the battle or against the enemy, and we take ground. Like back in the day, it was like, here's my ground, that's your ground. And we fight and I take your ground, and we take your supplies and your livestock and stuff, right? Like this is what happens. If I didn't then go after the next guy on the other side of you, and then the next guy, eventually the army gets tired and we run out of food and we run out of supplies and all the ground that we just had, nobody's farming it, and nobody, like all the livestock is not well kept, and you just over and over and over again, just basically ruin what you've just taken over. And then you spread yourself thin, and then someone comes and grabs you and swoops you up pretty easily. And so there's this understanding of taking ground and then cultivating, taking ground and then cultivating. And so I think if we have that poise of knowing kind of when to maybe turn off the hose, most business owners are like, look, man, I just need more clients. I just want to make more money, right? Because maybe they haven't figured out that steady flow, of prospects or calls. But if you've got that figured out, then it is the backside. You do have to cultivate. Otherwise, it'll just eventually implode, right?
Yeah. And I think to some degree we had at least in my experience, it's a little bit of an unfair advantage in that it's a smaller community. We grew out of a sheer lack of other competition, which isn't going to happen in Kansas City if you're trying to start a plumbing business. But I think you can still learn some of those principles, right? Like we didn't necessarily have to spend on the marketing to get the leads, but we did still have to focus on that cultivation. And that's the part where I felt like I was better at. I can explain to customers why they should use us. I'm good at the sales part of it. And to some degree, I'm good at understanding our team and what they're good at, but it was taking that step back to say, no one's happy killing ourselves to make no more in profit, just to say that we're a bigger company.
Yeah. It's funny because you're right. There's ego around that top line, but eventually you realize it's not what you make, it's what you keep. It's a big difference, And you being an accounting, a master's degree in accounting, like like if it doesn't make money, well, what does it make? Stress? No, thanks.
No, but you're right. It was around that ego of like, hey, now we have this many employees, or we're now this valuable of a company. And it's like, but are you really? If it's not, the right customers, that's one thing that we learned about is every customer, just like, and as you said, some people think, I just need more sales. I need more clients. I need more customers. But some of those customers, like we found, or they're not going to end up paying the bill, or they're just going to complain, or it's because they've called other people and had similar issues, and those people don't want to work for them anymore.
Yep.
So there's finding the right community to build the business within, and sometimes you gotta fire customers too.
Yeah, that's right. So true. Okay, we're going to go over to our speed round here. I want to come at you with KPIs to the one that has an accounting background. If you could only pick one thing to track forever and ever, what would it be?
I think it's profit. I mean, I sat on that question for a while, and I'm like, there are things that can help you make decisions to increase it. But if you're not focused on that bottom line and growing in a way that allows you to still be profitable, then it's not going to work. I think that we're seeing that now in the kind of overall economy, where these businesses have these huge numbers, but they don't make any money. And then all of a sudden it's like you dig in, and when times get tough, they go out, or, they can't sustain it. So that like actually having the foundation of a profitable business, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's why Apple has billions in cash, right?
Right.
Because they know that the storm eventually comes, and you have to be profitable to be able to weather it.
Right.
What book would you recommend, or maybe resource would you recommend for a business owner?
It's probably not even really a business book, but one that I've reread probably like every year is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Okay. Just because it talks about the two sides of the way our brain works, where we make quick decisions, based on our subconscious that we don't even realize. Mm-hmm. And then when you take a step to pause and think things out. So just kind of starting to understand your subconscious influences and why you're making decisions can make you a better person, parent, friend, and ultimately a business owner as well.
Yeah. A lot of those decision-making abilities. I mean, that's in essence why I crux the show on a good and bad decision, because It's why we are where we are today. You and me, the listener, everywhere. Like if we're honest, we're today where we are because of the decisions we made, good or bad. So I just love that picture of a resource being able to help us make better decisions subconsciously. Yes, I think we can even massage that tool, right? That subconscious tool, or even the ability to be able to slow down, think things through, knowing what you're looking for, not looking to hesitate, but to make decisions, I think is great. What would you say about intentionally networking and or masterminding?
So this is something that I probably have changed my mind on lately, because growing up, like, with my dad doing all these business, it was always just work first, like, do the work, and then the success will come later. But especially as a business owner, it's kind of lonely at the top, as they say. Like, you don't have someone that you can necessarily bounce ideas off of. It all comes down to you. So I have found just a comfort in talking to other people, whether it's, joining a mastermind group. I haven't actually joined one yet, but networking is one of the things that I've used the most in the past year, I'd say, is just talking to other people that maybe they're not business owners, but have found success in another area of their life. One of the reasons why I started the podcast in the beginning was just a chance to talk to people, because you learn so much hearing other people's stories, how they overcome things, and just a way to kind of say, here's what I'm struggling with. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think even earlier, 10, 15 minutes ago, when you did the impossible and you turned my own show back towards me, which is great. I love it. I really do appreciate it. It just shows your desire to want to like, let's go back and forth. Let's do this thing together. And you're right. It at least here's what I found. What I'm hearing you say, at least in my words, it was that seemed soft, right? It seemed like, oh, that's like business therapy, like, ugh.
Yeah.
But when you realize that, like, I am over here by myself making pretty weighty decisions on a regular basis, and there's some weight to that, like real weight for my family, for my team, for my team's families. Like, I'm over here making some pretty big moves and nobody knows. It's like, whoa, I'd love just a little bit of a reverberation here in the room of some thought, and to be able to have other people that that are at that level or even above be able to pour into you is obviously a big reason why we do this. It's why we're doing the show right now, to be able to help other people in the same exact way. So I just appreciate that perspective. Next question for you is around family. I prepped you a little bit before I hit the record button. I didn't tell you exactly what I was going to ask here, but Gathering the Kings this year in 23, I'm taking not a new approach. I've always been family focused, but I'm really trying to break this family, marriage, and business thing wide open, because it's something that we wrestle with constantly. I don't believe in balance, but what I do believe in is going after or obsessing over my marriage, my family, my kids, and my business all at the same time. And I want to know how you have done that. Practical, maybe a tip or two on how you've been able to obsess over all of it at the same time.
I don't think I've done it well, to be honest. I do make a lot of the decisions on growth and trying to build something sustainable. And the fact now that I have children, and the idea that I want them to see a representation of what hard work and what, your own ingenuity and things like that can do for you.
Yeah.
I always hated the idea in corporate world that someone else put a number on my worth. Like, I'm telling you, you make X amount per year. I'd rather make less, but know that I'm doing it on my own and that I'm in control of it. So I hope to be a representation to my family of what hard work and things like that can be. When it comes to balance, I have tried a lot of the reason for those policies and procedures just to take a step back, to be able to spend some more time with young children. And, I bring a lot of that home, because like we talked about, without a mastermind group, without a peer group that you can talk to, sometimes your wife becomes your sounding board,
which is good and tough sometimes.
Right. So, I mean, I think we've done a good job of being on the same page about what that means, but I think, and I'd be curious on your perspective on this too, because we talked a little bit before about, like, right now we're sleeping in different rooms because of how our young children, it's like we don't have a lot of intimacy time, and that could just be for conversation, because you're just it's always go with kids and with work, with this and that. So it's like, to me, it's I've started. So what I've done some research on how to do this, and it's like, well, it says that people that manage their time better do what's like block scheduling. So I've actually blocked off time in my calendar now for those sort of things. Or maybe it's leaving my phone away
Yep.
because there's always somebody that needs something,
Always.
like, so you have to be deliberate in saying, oh no, this time is already carved out.
Yep.
But you have to also be flexible and realize that things are going to change. Like my kids gave me a cold this week, and then we had them at the doctor in the morning yesterday. So it's like things are going to
Yep.
change, but be intentional about blocking time. So do you do that? Do you block time for your family?
I do.
Okay.
And it's probably one of the biggest shifts that I changed. I've made different iterations of that blocking. And so like right now, what it looks like is that I go pretty hard early in the morning until about 2, 3, pick up my kids, and I spend a good chunk of time with them. I even put them down for bed. And then, in the late evening, it'll either be another flow for me in the office or time with my wife. And again, we've got a young baby as well, same as yours, 7 months. And so, sleeping in the guest room has been a thing, passing the baby back and forth. Sometimes it's sleepless nights, sometimes it's not. Sometimes, our time that we had scheduled for us is interrupted by a upset baby or an older child, because we got 4 that wake up and random time, 9 o'clock at night, and they're just up. And it's like, okay, well, here we go. So I think that the main point really, obviously, yes, super tactical, put it on the calendar. If you're listening right now and you don't have like a family time on the calendar, that's like just step 1, like, because you and I both know if it's not on there, you're going to do something else, period.
Mm-hmm.
And then just knowing that, like, if you have it there, at least attempting to get done. But then there's this flexibility, kind of like you said. The main piece, I think, is that like it's all together. It's not family and business. It's like we're all in it together. I had a guest a couple of weeks ago say that he wanted the business to be a child, not a mistress.
I like that.
From the perspective of my wife, from the perspective of my children, looking at a mistress versus just another kid. It's like, wow, well, yeah, like we embrace the child. That's part of the family. Like we know their name. We love them. They're part of the activities. We're part of their, like, we're in it together. It's not all about them. It's not, they're just only one of the children. But as soon as it becomes the mistress, it's like this thing over here that takes away daddy's attention, and we don't know them, and it's separate from us. And it creates this boundary, which I was just like, whoa, mind blown. Boom. Totally agree with that. What would you say to that?
Well, no, one thing I think that is important for me to figure out, and I think would be really good for your listeners, is that there is not a right answer to this question. So like I've always been an early riser. So like even in college, I would get up at like 5 a.m, go to the gym, so now what I do is I try and set an alarm at, like, let's say it's 4, because I know that kids aren't going to wake up for another 3 or 4 hours. I can get a lot of things done.
Yep.
But that doesn't always work. So like I like to listen and follow like these motivational speakers, these influential people, and they'll always talk about the morning routine, or this is what your day should look like. And it's like, that is good. And it's like, but then I always feel like, am I failing because I'm not getting up at 4? I'm not getting my workout in. I'm not eating healthy because we're running. And the answer is no. Like, you have to do the best with what you can. And I think as long as you are doing that, and the relationship with your family and your team is not devolving because of it, then do the best you can. But there is no one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to intentionality, right? So if you're intentionally seeking your family at the same time you're building a business, what I've said here recently, I've said this on a couple shows, is that I'm a builder, right? Like I literally get dopamine. Like I'm excited about building a business, building a team, like going after something, doing a marketing campaign, like let's go. But then playing Uno with my kids is like, I don't know. Right? Yeah. No. Like, forget the game of Uno. That's not even what I'm talking about anymore. I get to build my child.
Yeah.
What am I teaching them in the game of Uno or Monopoly or the cash flow game for kids, which we love? It's like, how I get to teach my 9-year-old about assets and liabilities. And so when we're on our way to Costco, she's like, Daddy, we're on our way to buy a bunch of liabilities. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Good thing Daddy's got some assets to pay for these things. But when you have that perspective of like, okay, it no longer is my identity of like that I'm a business owner or that I'm a dad, I'm a builder. And the builder gets to build businesses. I get to build children. I get to build my marriage, all this cool stuff. So hopefully that's helpful to you and to the listener as well. Thank you for your perspective there. I got one last question here for you, Jordan. I want to know, if you could whisper in the younger Jordan's ear, what would you say?
I would say be patient and be grateful. Right. So one of the things I've been focusing on this year as well is gratitude and kind of being at peace with and being in the moment. So like part of that putting the phone away was, let me actually talk to the person that's here. Because even if that phone's here, subconsciously can feel that disrespect, that disconnection that you have from that conversation. But then around patience, it's like, I think we in society today, like there's nothing wrong with ambition, but like we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, just because you see an influencer that has some course that they're going to teach you how to make $10 million with only working 2 hours a week, it's like,
Right.
let's get some perspective. Like people work a long time to find success in life. So there's a quote that says like, you will overestimate what you can do in 1 year, but underestimate what you can do in 10.
Yeah.
So kind of set more realistic goals about, in the short term, like just focus on maybe the habits and the processes that are going to build that long term, but you'll be very surprised where you are in 10 years. Because I always said I was going to be worth, like $1 million by the time I was 30. And it's like at 27, I didn't know how I was going to do that. But at 31, it's like, well, that was a low bar, so like things can change rapidly. And I think you just have to have perspective on doing things the right way, setting realistic expectations around it.
Yeah, I love it. You said it right with the underestimating in a year, or overestimating in a year, underestimating in 10. I think for the listener right now, if you take away anything, I mean, Jordan's given you so much today, but that perspective of, hey, just keep at it. Like, and it's not even like it's a lowering of a standard. It's just the disciplines that are going to create, just keep doing those. Don't worry about the result. And there's plenty of influencers starting to talk about this as well. Alex Hormozy being one of them. It's like, look, here's the activity. Just right here, if you just do this longer than anybody else, that's what success ultimately comes from. So Jordan, you've been incredible. How can the listener find you? So number one, if they just a business owner, they want to pick your brain, maybe they're a plumbing or HVAC electrical service type company, and they need some like accounting, consulting, understanding numbers. Maybe they need to reach out to you for that type of service. How can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me pretty much any social media. So it's always like at jasimon.co. You can send me an email to jordan@jasimonco.com. But I mean, even if you just want to chat, I'm always open to it. Message me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever it is, and love to hear what you're going through. And, maybe we can help each other out.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you being open, and we'll put all those links in the show notes as well. Blessings on your family, on your little newborn, and of course your other child as well, your marriage and your team, all that good stuff. And so we just appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time and giving. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing literally over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings literally exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.